Good morning and welcome to today's episode of Business Spotlight, where we are joined by Chris Peabody from Old Rope Records. How are you, Chris?
I'm very well, thanks. How are you?
Yeah, I'm really good, thank you. Really good. I dive straight in, Chris, so please tell us what you do and how long you've been doing it for.
Sure. Okay. Well, I am the founder and CEO of Old Rope Records, which I established with two partners in 2017. We are essentially an ambient record label and production company specializing in music for well-being and music that helps people. Essentially, it's music that could help you with anxiety. It could be music that helps you sleep. It could be music that helps you with tinnitus or all sorts of things. It's about utilizing the power of sound and music to help people achieve an outcome, which might be to de-stress, it might be to relax, it might be to get pumped up. So we've been specializing in that area since 2017. We've become one of the largest ambient record labels in the world. We've now got over 500,000 tracks in our catalogue. We're valued at about £7 or £8 million, and we've had over 2 billion streams on music services. We have a small team of staff based out of our Banbury office in Oxfordshire. And we do a lot of things on the periphery as well, all sorts of things to help people utilize music and sound to help them get through their day or achieve an outcome, essentially.
Oh my gosh, that's fascinating. What motivated you to start the business?
Well, I worked in the music industry for a long time before starting this. So I lived and worked in London, and I worked with independent labels, artists, distributors, helping artists kind of navigate the new streaming economy and understand how they can reach their fan base, promote their music, and so on and so forth. And it seemed like there was a change happening with regard to how people were using music in their day. So people kind of went from searching for music that they were familiar with to help them with an aim to essentially what was context-based music searches, which is music to help me sleep, or music to help me work, or music to help me meditate, or to do yoga, or to dance, or to sleep, whatever it might be. And so we wanted to be there when people search for that stuff. So when people are trying to achieve an outcome, our catalogue was that which they would find. And we wanted to make sure that we were delivering on that from a quality perspective that meant it really worked. So we've worked with, scientists and music therapists and all sorts of people to help us kind of understand how music works and how sound is processed by the brain to help you achieve these certain outcomes. And we've grown really nicely. We've got a small team of composers and musicians that we work with, so we own all of the catalogue that we put out. So we have complete ownership, so kind of end to end. But it was essentially really working closely in the music industry and understanding how the dynamic between listeners and artists worked, and how we could kind of fill that need to provide reliable catalogue that's going to help people in these certain situations, essentially.
The reason I find it so fascinating is because I instantly put myself in that sort of scenario where I'll be doing a workout and I will search for a workout playlist, or I'll be in nature and I'll search for songs to listen to in nature. And I'm pretty sure there's a fact that a lot of people speeding, one of the reasons that they speed is because of the type of music that they're listening to.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, this is it. It affects you in such a profound way, and in such a way that people aren't actually that familiar with, in terms of how it can affect your behavior and affect your decision making and affect all sorts of things. And there's chemical and physical changes that happen as you listen to music, and it's a huge influencing factor in how people achieve certain outcomes or whatever it might be. It can be just as useful in the gym as an isotonic drink, or it can be just as useful to help you sleep as sleeping tablets. It's you're still dealing with the brain and the way the brain interprets stimulus, and I still don't think it's being used effectively enough to actually influence people in a positive way. So there's there's types of music that you'll listen to in different settings, for example. So if you have classical music on in a restaurant, people tend to spend more money on their food. You know, if you play certain types of music, it will influence your buying patterns and the decisions that you're making that you think are completely organic and completely kind of free to yourself, but they are being subtly influenced by the music that's around you. And one of the things that I'm particularly interested in is how we can utilize music to impact people in a positive way, for example, in scenarios like healthcare. So for example, if you went into your GP appointment or you were about to have surgery, what's the best piece of music that I could give to you? Now, you're not the one to answer that question because it's very, very difficult. You know, what's the best piece of music that will help you stay relaxed, stay calm, and be able to process what you're going through? What's the best piece of music that can influence you if you're receiving bad information or good information, or to help you sleep afterwards? You know, because it's very personal to each of us, and actually we can use music in that way. And I think that's where there's opportunity in this field, is to actually start using music as a means to benefit people rather than just to help them, you know, put their hands in their pockets more frequently in a restaurant or something like that. It's, you know, what's the best piece of music for, you know, special needs education or the prison system or libraries or, you know, whatever it might be. All sorts of scenarios where you can use music to influence behavior in a positive way that is proven and effective, and you know, because you can maneuver crowds, you can completely influence behavior and the way people interact with the world and their surroundings and other people just by the music that they play. You know, there's really kind of basic examples of this where, you know, bus stations in London will play classical music because it deters people doing drugs and things like that, because, you know, there's an associative element to people being in scenarios with certain types of music that they either kind of agree with or they don't, and they don't want to necessarily be in those sorts of scenarios, but you can use it in all sorts of ways. So that's what I'm kind of fascinated with, and that's where some of our work kind of leads us.
I think that's brilliant. My mind went to education.
Yeah.
I listened to a podcast, a brilliant Rob Dial, the Mindset Mentor. When he does his focus work, he listens to one particular type of music, and he knows that's his focus work. And that got me thinking, as you were talking about the different type of music in hospitals, the playlists that women compile for birthing. And yeah, it's a sense that potentially is underutilized for that sort of added experience.
And you see it's fascinating because you see it every day. You know, if you ever watch a film without the soundtrack, your emotional connection with that is almost non-existent. It is the
Jaws. Could you imagine Jaws with no soundtrack?
Exactly. It's the music that takes you on that journey. It's the music that determines how you're going to feel. You know, and there's great examples of this where you just change the music to a scene, and it completely changes your response to it and the way that you feel about it. And if you can apply some of that context or apply some of that logic to the real world, and you start to realize how profound an impact it can have in the way people go about their day. And that's where I see a huge opportunity that's not yet being fully utilized. It's being utilized commercially to help make more commercial and more profit-driven decisions. But I think healthcare, education, all sorts of, you know, in crowd control, all sorts of scenarios where you can use music to influence in a positive way that achieves an outcome that's beneficial for the person rather than for the place or the, you know, whoever's, you know, at the other end of the credit card.
Oh, well, it sounds like since 2017 you've come an awful long way, and it sounds like you've certainly thrown yourself into what you do and learned so much. Has it been everything that you hoped it would be?
Yeah, I think it has. Yeah, it's been really exciting. We didn't really have huge expectations starting out. You know, we've grown this organically completely. So we didn't have any investor funding. We didn't really have any great network. You know, it was started in the bedroom, kind of, on a computer, and a few microphones and recording sound and things like that. And then as we grow and as you start to see, you know, the cash coming in, you're just reinvesting that into, you know, expanding your operations and expanding your team and expanding your catalog and so on and so forth. And, you know, to have a team of 12 and a team of composers, and to get to the point where we've got 500,000 tracks in our catalog that is being streamed millions of times every day, is amazing. You know, what's really nice, and this is what I always told our staff, is essentially every time someone presses play, we're creating a relationship between the person on the other end, and it's up to us to make sure that we do everything that person wants, whether it's, you know, helping their baby get to sleep, or whether it's to help them through their gym session, or to help them study, or whatever it is. You know, it's up to us to make sure, because that's the most important thing at that point. It's, you know, try, you know, if you've got a screaming baby and there's a piece of music that works, this is what's amazing, is that I've got a 3-year-old now myself, and whenever I talk to people about this, they go, oh, well, I often put rain sounds on, or ocean noises and things like that for my baby, and more often than not, that'll be my catalog. They won't know it, and I don't know necessarily it's mine, but you know, it becomes a crux, and it becomes a crutch rather in people's life that they depend on and they rely on, and it's up to us to make sure that we achieve that outcome. So it's really nice to have been able to grow it organically, and to grow a team where you give them good jobs with, you know, proper meaningful work. And I always think about businesses of whether they're net contributors to society and to the world or not. And actually, I think we can be quite proud of the fact that we do benefit people, and we don't have a really harmful supply chain that's creating tons and tons of plastic or anything like that. You know, we do a really simple thing, which is we work with musicians and composers to create pieces of music that are going to help people, and we try and put it in front of them, and that's it. You know, and that's really nice. It's quite a simple business, but it's a nice, you know, it's a nice one to be in.
Yeah, just exactly what it says on the tin. No, I think that's wonderful. The music business is very broad. It's very competitive. What would you say that you do that makes you stand out?
So what we focused on in the early days is building scale and building a business, essentially on a bootstrapping it. You know, it's doing whatever you can for as little cost as possible, and that means kind of focusing on building a structure that is always scalable, and applying that with everything that you do. That says, okay, we've got a team of 12, we've got a small team of composers and musicians, yet we've got a catalogue of 500,000. How have we done that? That's because we focused on scale from day one. That says, is this process that we're about to implement going to be scalable? Can we, if our business grew, you know, and if you took a more usual business with a client, for example, is your interaction with that client scalable if you had 1,000 clients? So how do you make sure that your interactions and the processes that your business follows and the processes that your staff follow and so on and so forth is scalable? So that's what we focused a lot of our effort on, which meant that we could run a huge operation, becoming one of the largest, you know, ambient and music libraries in the world, with such a small team and such a low number of people. Is about focusing on scale and focusing on quality and focusing on the end user, rather than focusing on you know, things that don't necessarily matter. So for example, we don't actually promote our business in itself at all, really, because it's not our business brand that we push, it's our music that we focus on. Now, for us, the value of whether people know who we are or not doesn't really matter, because our music is what we promote, and it's up to that to work. Otherwise, it's just peacocking and just kind of, you know, we don't have any inbound kind of, we're not growing our business. We sit quietly in our little corner of Oxfordshire building this stuff. We don't really talk about it, and we don't do press, and we don't do advertising for our own brand's sake, because actually our focus is on building that catalogue of music and putting it in front of the right people and promoting that, you know. And I think it's also been a benefit, because it means that we're not distracted by other things, you know, and actually we're focusing on the core all the time. But so the key thing, I think, for us has always been, is that focus on scale. Is what I'm doing scalable? Can I replicate this 1,000 times? If not, how do I, at this point, implement structures that are, because that's where I want to get to. So how do I create scale from day one? And that's how we grew very quickly with such a small team. It's that focus on scale, and focusing on the right thing, which is the product and the user, rather than our core business, and it's be different for other businesses where they, they have a lot of inbound and they need to kind of create a much bigger presence, but we didn't, which is nice. We didn't have a phone. We don't have a phone in the office.
It's what's that like? Oh no,
great.
that's amazing. Yeah.
My thing has always been about kind of working for myself and making sure that I'm not beholden too much to clients and so on and so forth. So we've got this beautiful business where we put stuff out into the world and people like it and it works, and we don't have, investors or whomever it is kind of picking up the phone every day telling us what we should or shouldn't be doing. Yeah.
It sounds precise, identifying the scalability, really focusing on that core, two really important things that stand you out in the industry and that actually attribute to your growth. That was actually my next question. What else would you attribute your growth to? You've mentioned your team before. You've mentioned things like not having distractions, no telephone. What else would you be able to identify?
It was so in year one, we focused very hard on becoming the masters and the experts in one very particular area. We didn't go broad too quickly. So we nailed one thing really, really well. And that's what we focused on. And we understood the relationship, for example, on Spotify. And so we focused with Spotify straight away. And we thought, we're gonna nail this first. This is where we're gonna first focus our efforts. And we focused on one catalog before we went much broader, before we started getting classical piano and lo-fi hip hop and all this sort of stuff that we have now. It was, how do we understand what we're doing on a small scale or on one particular area? How can we become masters and experts in that? And we did that before we even let ourselves kind of grow our catalog to, and diversify. It was quite a sharp focus on one particular area in the short term that allowed us to understand something fully before we moved and started to spread broadly. I think that's one of the key things. It's not going too broad too quickly. Don't try and be everything to everybody all at once. You might get to that point down the line. But in the short term, you need to, if you can be doing one thing really, really well, then you're gonna be able to replicate that, and then you're going to be able to scale it.
Yeah, do one thing really, really well, and then grow from there. No, that's a great bit of advice. How do you balance, Chris? I love this question. How do you balance your personal life with the demands of running a business?
We are, so in the same way that our staff have, we have very flexible working, and as a business owner, you don't just work during the 9 to 5 kind of hours. And if you can appreciate that work happens in the evening, or work happens, whenever it kind of strikes, or whenever you're in that headspace, that allows a degree of flexibility that says, I don't need to get all of my work done before 5 o'clock, for example, which means I can pick up my kid at 3 o'clock, or, I can work from home, because we have similar policies with the staff that we have in the office. Okay. But it isn't like a normal job in that sense. In owning a business isn't like a normal job, because it never really leaves you. My wife is incredibly patient, because we have a lot of conversations about work. We speak about the business all the time, because I'm passionate about it and I care about it, and it's really interesting. And even the bits that I wasn't really qualified for when I started this. I wasn't really, I didn't have huge amounts of experience in leading a team and managing people and doing one-to-ones and doing HR and doing all that sort of stuff that you take on. But that's part of it, and that comes with it. And that if your business itself is kind of as important enough to you and the end goal, then all of that stuff becomes really, really important as well, and it becomes just as important. But we try to be very flexible. We're in a bit of a luxury position because we aren't in a life or death scenario, and we try to keep it. We try to make sure that there's a healthy kind of work-life balance for myself and for everybody, because at the end of the day, the problems that we have in work aren't the fundamental problems that are gonna, you're gonna think about in 30 years' time. The fact in 30 years' time, the problem is going to be that you didn't spend enough time with your kid, or you didn't, focus enough on that. And I'm been very conscious of that all the way through, is that there are more important things in this business, and there are more important things than how much work I get done today. And if you factor that in, it's quite freeing, and it allows you that flexibility. That's what I would say, I suppose.
I love that. I think it's brilliant that there's blurred lines between sort of work and personal life to give you that flexibility, but communication with your wife is key by the sounds of it, and being passionate about your business means that you can prioritize and really understand what's important, whether that's family at the time or whether that's business at the time, but that things move incredibly fast by the sounds of it. In 30 years' time, exactly. Those problems are going to be a distant. What would you say has been your biggest learning so far?
I think it's from being in a kind of leadership position, is to trust the people that you bring in around you to do something that, because I grew this with my two partners, and it was very personal. It was, we grew this and we did absolutely every part of it. Bringing in staff, you have to sometimes look at it and go, I could do that better, but you have to pull yourself away and let people in, and let people and trust people to do the job which you've hired them to do, and to allow people to make mistakes and allow people to grow within that role that they have, and to try to distance my own kind of personal inclination to get everything done really, really quickly, really, really well. And today, with, if I let this team work at it, it'll take longer, but in the long run, and it comes back to the scalability, then they're going to be able to do it better. They're going to be able to do it quicker than I ever could, because you can't scale a business if you're doing everything, and it's that bringing in people early and bringing in people and trusting them to do it and letting them make mistakes and giving them the time to learn and grow and develop in that role. I think that's been the biggest learning I've had personally.
Yeah, how do you trust? Because that's quite a difficult thing for business owners to be able to walk away, to be hands off. How do you do that specifically?
You have to let people make mistakes, and you have to let people understand what the expected outcome is. And if you've got clear communication lines, and if you've got trust in terms of they understand that you're not trying to trip them up, that you're not trying to catch them out, and you're not trying to just wait for them to fall over, it has to be kind of mutual. It has to be two ways. They have to understand that, you've got their best interests at heart in the same way. It's got to be reciprocal. But I think it's about allowing people the space to make mistakes. It's allowing people to figure it out themselves, and it's allowing people the time to learn how to do something, rather than just kind of muscling in and saying, this is what I needed, it should have been done by now, or whatever it might be. It's accepting that time is more flexible usually than you might think as an owner, because as an owner, you're in the mindset, and I have a tendency to be impatient with certain things, because I have a vision for something, and then I want it as quickly as possible. You have to kind of try to allow the team to generate and ideate and create that themselves, because you can't do it all yourself. So yeah, it's about giving people the time, giving people the freedom to learn and to grow in those roles, I think. But making sure that it's reciprocal, making sure that the trust is on both sides. I think that's, I mean, it's I'm probably not a master at it, but that's what I'm attempting for anyway.
Well, I feel that it's probably or possibly one of the most difficult things to master. So yeah, getting better each time is key. You mentioned there about your vision and about having a vision for something. Do you share that vision with the team?
Yeah, I try to. I have lots of ideas all the time, so I have to be more selective than perhaps I would always be. But I think understanding where we're trying to get to, which is essentially becoming that music company that impacts people's lives for the better and is starting to create, is something that, if everybody's driving towards that, you know, it gives meaning to the menial tasks sometimes. There's all sorts of boring work that needs to be done and administrative work that needs to be done in any business. And if you are doing that work in isolation without the vision that this is where we are trying to get to, and this is the goal that we're looking for, then that's when it becomes mind-numbing and boring and so on. But if you know that that is a small part of something that needs to happen in order that it's going to help us all reach this, you know, end point, which is that vision of becoming this business that's going to do X, Y, and Z. Yeah, so I do try to do that as often as, you know, as often as possible. But I think it's not just about looking in the future. I think one of the key things is that businesses don't do enough is celebrating the wins more frequently, and actually understanding the successes of now, rather than just pitching your potential success 5 years down the line as a vision and go, well, actually right now we've got 3 million people listening to our music every single night, helping them do something. Now that's amazing. We've got a ridiculously intimate relationship with people all around the world that every night they're going to put this music on. It's going to help their baby sleep, or it's going to help them sleep, or it's going to help them cook their dinner, whatever it might be. Now we're allowed into these people's lives, and often at their most vulnerable, because it might be that they're having a panic attack, or they're suffering from anxiety or tinnitus, or whatever it might be that our music helps with. And that's really amazing. And sometimes focusing on the success of now is more important than the potential success or the vision for the future. And I think that's something that I've tried to reiterate and to try and focus on, actually, is that we're doing it. You know, it's, you often, you know, it's that thing that says, you know, the best days of your life are now, generally. And sometimes remembering that and acknowledging that and celebrating that and focusing on that is really empowering, and it makes you feel great, you know. It's really nice.
Yeah, it's all too forgotten. We're often, I'm terrible for it myself sometimes. I'm 2 feet in the future, and maybe if I poured myself into the present, there would be much more to celebrate. So that's such a great share. Thank you so much for that. Where do you see yourself in 5 years? And how I always like to end is, and do you have any words of advice for other business owners in the same position as yourself?
Well, in 5 years, so I'm looking at, I want to diversify. I don't like to sit still for too long. So I've got other businesses that I'm looking at starting, which are in similar related fields within music and within helping people within music and using music as a means to an end of some sort. So I'm looking at diversifying what it is that I do, growing the core business and making sure that we're reaching as many people as possible on that side. But yeah, I have 1,000 ideas and I have 1,000 things I want to do, and I want to try and do as many of them as possible, because I think that's really exciting to focus on projects and to build new things. In terms of advice for other business owners, I think that a lot of the reason that people tend not to start businesses is through false barriers that they put up. And actually, a lot of the time you can just start. And usually when you speak to people who say, I've got an idea for a thing, you go, great, how are you starting it? It's like, I just need to get this, or if I can get this, then I'll be able to start it. And generally speaking, those are quite false barriers. They don't really exist. And you can within 5 minutes you can explain away that you don't need that. Actually, you can start, and you realize that actually this person isn't motivated enough to start this thing, and actually the barriers that are in there are false. So I think, recognize whether the barriers that are preventing you from starting are actually real or whether they're false, because oftentimes I think you realize that they're imagined, and it's actually a creation in your own mind of, this will put it off, and I've got an explanation and I've got a rationale and a reason why I haven't done this thing as an easy way out. And actually, if you really want to start something, focus on what those barriers are that are preventing you from doing it, and try and work out whether they're real or imagined, because often I think you'll find that most of them are probably imagined, and you can get rid of those, and then you can focus on the ones that are real. But usually they are not things that are completely prohibitive, and actually you should just be able, you can usually just start. So I think, yeah, that's what I would say is, are those barriers that are preventing you from doing it real, or are they imagined? And being honest with yourself, because if you find they are all imagined, the reality is it might be that you don't really want to do it, and that's fine too. You don't have to.
But you can focus on other things. You can make the decision to either start or stop. I think that's a really important share for people looking to start a business, and also take their business to the next level, maybe employing their first employee, taking, to maybe growing the team from 5 to 10. Those self-imposed barriers, those false barriers, limiting beliefs, are real for a lot of people. So I think that is a fantastic takeaway. I think that's a great insight to share. So Chris, it's been such a pleasure chatting to you today. I think what you do is incredible. I feel like I've probably listened to a good selection of your catalogue. I will go and check my Spotify playlist as we finish. But thank you very much, and I hope we get to speak to each other soon, because I feel like with all of your ideas, the next year is going to be somewhat spectacular for you. So thanks, Chris.
No, you're very welcome. Thanks a lot. It's been really nice chatting.
Thank you. Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye. Cheers.